Greetings and welcome to Hexed Encountered. I'm Joe. It is time to do our rules review of the game The Rock of Chickamauga, which is the Battle of Chickamauga, September 18th to the 20th, 1863. This is from Flying Pig Games, designed by Hermann Luttmann, and is part of the Black Swan series. Now, from a visual standpoint, this is probably not going to be an overly exciting video. However, we are going to go through the entire rulebook, and I'm going to try to give you the breakdown of how things work without literally reading the rulebook. I view this as kind of a multimedia cheat sheet, shall we say, where you can, for those of you who maybe are visual learners or like to hear things rather than read things, this may be a useful tool. At least that is the intent and the hope of yours truly as I do this for this particular game. And so let us get underway. Okay, we are going to start with the basics, and the basics include or begin with here in section A, as you can see, our game components. Our scale is 1 hex, being approximately 200 yards. Each strength point is 100 men or 1 artillery gun. A turn is an hour. And unit counters are typically a regiment or battery, but sometimes more. Next up are the unit counters, and this is the counter that is shown there, although it's shown on its reduced side. So let's go over what each piece of information here means. And again, it's going to match up with what this says in your rule book, but just in case you wanted to see the full strength side, you can see it right here. Okay, so let's go through it piece by piece. A is the corps affiliation, so that would be this little bit right up here at the top. 21st Corps. The brigade name is Beatty, right? Pretty easy. This is all at the top. And then our division code is C. So this is a 2-letter division code showing which division the unit belongs to. Divisions each use their own background color, and Confederate artillery, as a note, instead use a dark gray banner with no division code. Okay, D, which is in the lower right corner, or I'm sorry, along the side here, right there. The 2 starbursts there that are red. That is the how many counters belong to that brigade. So again, I am not reading the rule book here. I've made notes that I'm basing this on. So as always, you should read the rule book. This is just kind of a refresher that you can look at using the chapters to say, okay, this is what I may have forgotten, or this is maybe an explanation of what it is. The rule book's well written, well organized, very thorough, so you don't have any problems if you read the rule book. Now, in the center of the counter, you'll find you'll have an image of the unit. This would be infantry, of course, but you do also, of course, have cavalry that's dismounted and then mounted on the other side. Okay, and of course, got the guns as well. And there you have the guns. Okay, so again, you can see what they look like. Now let's talk about the strength points, which are in the corner here. And that is they're in the lower left corner. It's a black number. It shows the Union strength points, each being worth about 100 men. Now some unit counters have a small R to show repeating rifles, while artillery includes a letter for the type of gun, R, S, M, or N. And so if we pull out our counter that we were just looking at, you see M. And that indicates the type of gun. Now our other number, the red 2 here, is the unit's cohesion rating. So this reflects morale, training, and battlefield experience. Units will test against this CR, cohesion rating, frequently, and it can be shifted up or down depending on circumstances, and importantly, it can never go above 6 or below 0. Quick mention here of what you see in this yellow box, the unit support bonus. Units can sometimes lend support to nearby comrades. If infantry or cavalry from the same brigade are adjacent and not shaken, they can give a +1 cohesion bonus. Artillery never gives support, but cavalry can if mounted and meeting the right conditions. This rule may look simple, but it is a key mechanic. That's why it's in a yellow box, and it is key to holding a line together. Now, as we saw a few minutes ago, or a little bit ago, we saw that there are two sides to a unit, right? So this is its fresh side. Then you have its battle-worn side, which is its reduced side, and it's got that nice white triangle there in the corner to signify that. And so that is one of the things you will need to look for with your units. And for cavalry, we have mounted and dismounted. We don't have the same kind of situation. You can see just by looking at the counter, this is where that unit image comes in handy. If you see the fellows riding on their horses with their sabers held out, you know that they are mounted. And likewise, if they are dismounted and holding their guns, then you know they are dismounted. Another thing you'll want to be aware of is these, shaken markers. Shaken, not stirred, gives a reduction of 1 strength point and a loss of cohesion as well. And on the flip side, all units shaken, and they are described here in the book right there. Okay, and basically if a unit fails its test for cohesion, it becomes shaken. So you place the marker on top of it, the unit immediately loses a strength point and a cohesion rating. And there are other markers for things like moved, fired, and other game states, depending on the scenario. We will get into that when we do gameplay. That is a fairly standard thing to put a moved marker, a fired marker, etc. when a unit has taken an action. Now let's talk about the cards. The game comes with a whole bunch of them. This is approximately half the deck right here. I have 2 equal-sized handfuls of cards here. You can see that is a lot of cards. And basically, they have a variety of uses. You have core activation cards, which are shown here. That lets you activate your formations. Then you have the division activation card here, which also allows you to work at the divisional level. The event cards, which bring in special tactics or circumstances, shown here. Then we have fog of war cards, which inject the unpredictability of warfare into the game. Right here. We also have friction of war cards representing confusion or setbacks. And that's this guy here. And then you have the CIC cards, which are powerful tools tied to the overall commander, such as Rosecrans, Thomas, or Bragg. These add friction, chaos, and command flavor to the game. Now, before we get into the sequence of play, we'll talk about the other components. 2 large maps of the Chickamauga battlefield, and there is, of course, the large inner map. There's also player aids, several of those, which summarize the rules and give us all the tables we need with which to play. Our command displays for both sides for organizing our corps and divisions. A CRT card, which obviously is important, your combat results table, for resolving fire combat and assault combat, and a set of 6 dice that are used throughout the game. So that's our components, and now it is time to move on to the sequence of play. So here on one of our player aid cards, as well as in the rule book, of course, you have the sequence of play. So the first step, as is shown right here, is to advance that game turn marker. Then you go to the command decision phase, which is explained here with points A through E. Then we have preliminary bombardment phase, the card draw phase, which also has several sections to it. Then you have your activation phase, and finally the end phase. Now let's talk about what each of these mean really quickly. So the advanced game turn phase is pretty straightforward. At the start of the turn, you move the turn marker 1 space forward on the game turn track. This step also checks for reinforcements, possible victory point conditions, or special instructions from the scenario. Then we have our command decision phase. This is where the players secretly decide how they'll plan for the coming turn. Each player gathers their available division and activation cards, then determines which event cards they'll commit. There are 3 key steps to this part of the phase. You have your extra preliminary bombardment, where players may discard up to 3 of their event cards face down, each one activating an extra artillery brigade in the next phase. These cards stay hidden, so the opponent knows the number discarded, but not what they were. Okay, and then you have your key event cards. The players may set aside a chosen number of event cards as key events. These are guaranteed to go into the turn's card draw pile. And then you have key events, or it explains. And the key event cards, players, or rather, key events represent a commander's planned efforts, though of course fog or friction of war can still upset them. Then we have our random event cards. Any remaining event cards are shuffled and a scenario specified number are added randomly into the card draw pile, and the rest are removed for this turn only. At the end of this phase, each player has built a mix of guaranteed and random events that will drive the upcoming action. Next up is our preliminary bombardment phase. This phase allows players to conduct artillery combat before the main action begins. The Union player goes first, selecting 1 artillery brigade and firing with all its units. Then the Confederates do the same. If players discarded event cards for extra bombardment, they may then fire with additional artillery brigades, alternating until all chosen brigades have fired. Only artillery brigades may participate in this phase, and only fire combat's allowed. So there's no assaults, no rallies, nothing like that. Notably, an artillery unit that fires here is still eligible to activate later in the turn, making this a powerful preparatory strike. Next, we move on to the card draw phase, as you can see right there. And the card draw phase is the heart of the turn. Okay, at the start of the phase, both players will shuffle their eligible cards. The activation event, CIC, fog of war, and possibly friction of war together into one pile. Then starting with the Union on even number turns and the Confederates on odd number turns, players will alternately draw cards 1 at a time until the pile is empty. Each draw can bring one of several outcomes. So you have tactics, or rather event cards. And this is Casey's Tactics, which is actually shown in the rulebook on page 8. You can see the entirety of the card here. So an event card is drawn, the owning player resolves it. Some are played immediately, others can be held. This one says hold. Hold for later. And any event can be used for its default effect if nothing else. So you have double time, things like double time, opportunity fire against enemy units, or smoke and dust to reduce enemy firepower. So that is what that is for. And again, there are examples here in the rulebook, including our Rebel Yell down here, as you can see. Again, the rulebook is a very good resource. This is meant more as a supporting element. Then there are the Fog of War cards. Okay, so here is what that looks like. And you can see you've got battlefield chaos and movement and fortunes of war, strategic options, all kinds of things on there. Based on a die roll, runs from 11 to 6d6. So you roll 2 d6s. The number will tell you what you get here. So you have battlefield chaos, which immobilizes units in a hex. You have movement, or wayward Union movement, or rebel movement, where you choose a unit and move it 1 hex. That is done by your opponent, by the way. Then you have your fortunes of war, which allow for rerolls and a range of some other unpredictable things like strategic options and general casualties and things like that, based on scenario rules. Then we have our core activation cards. And as you see here, we've got Bragg and Thomas. And also over here, you have a core activation card. I was just showing you kind of the general's cards as well. So here you have Buckner, left wing, average, and then things on numbers from 1 through 6, which of course equate to a D6. So corps activation cards, when one of these is drawn, the owning player rolls on the corps command table to determine which of the divisions or artillery brigades can activate, as detailed on here, as you can see. We'll explore how these activations work in our next part where we talk about activations. Then you have your CIC cards, which again was what we saw here at the beginning, right? And that's the description of it right there, right? They are cards that represent the overall Army commander stepping in directly. They allow powerful special actions such as bringing in reinforcements early or overriding command friction. Speaking of which, there are the friction of war cards, and these represent the grind of battlefield confusion, fatigue, smoke, and casualties. They disrupt plans by forcing command die rolls to 1 or triggering setbacks. So that covers the opening structure of a game turn here in the Rock of Chickamauga, from the sequence of play through our command decisions and so on down to the card draw phase. So now in the next part, we're going to talk about the activation phase. So this is where brigades move, fire, rally, and clash with the enemy. Let's break it down step by step. The activation phase is driven by the corps and division activation cards that are drawn earlier in the turn. Only the units indicated by those cards may act during this phase. When a corps activation card is drawn, you roll on that corps' command table. The result tells you which divisions, brigade, or artillery units may activate. You can see that right here. Okay, so this is the card for Sheridan's division. And as you can see, it's got 1 through 6 on here, and you would roll against that, and you see at the bottom it says division activation. So what do the various things on here mean? Well, you have various orders that you can do, obviously. And it means, say, division group activation will mean that all units in the division act together under one order. And a division by brigade activation means that each brigade gets its own order. And you can see those down here. You've got division group plus 1 hex of divisional artillery brigade. Right, so you've got that, and then you see the brigade plus 1 hex. There is also, it's not on Sheridan's card, but there are some that get division group, right? This is Johnson, and you can see division group there as well. So as I said, division group means all the units act together under one order, and division by brigade means each brigade gets its own order. And that gives you more flexibility, but often slower resolution. And no orders, of course, means no orders. And then you can see some of the other ones here. You can have a brigade or 1 hex of artillery, a brigade plus 1 hex of artillery, division group plus 1 hex, division group plus the artillery brigade, and then division by brigade plus artillery brigade. Those are the various things you will find on those divisional activation cards. Now, in terms of orders, you have attack orders, where you move toward the enemy and conduct fire or assault combat. Movement allowance is 5 movement points, or 8 for mounted cavalry. Then you have defend, which is consolidate, dig in, and trade fire. Units may fire with a column shift bonus, but movement is limited to the movement minimum move, Then you have maneuver, and this allows you to move quickly without engaging the enemy. Units can move up to 8 movement points or 12 for mounted cavalry, but can't fight. So it's important to remember that once assigned, the order only governs what the unit may do this activation. Afterwards, it can change with another activation or an event. Now, for artillery activations, they are handled separately. They may only issue fire combat, conduct movement, or rally, regardless of the infantry or cavalry orders. Artillery is more restrictive to simulate the real-world logistics of limbering and redeploying guns. As an example, as provided right here in the rule book itself on page 12, we have an activation example. So in this one, the Union draws Crittenden's Corps activation card. His command table roll triggers 2 division activation cards, Wood and Palmer. The Union player chooses to give Wood's division an attack order. All of Wood's infantry brigades activate together, along with one artillery brigade. Palmer's division also activates and receives a defend order. This combination allows the Union player to press forward aggressively with one division while holding ground with another, exactly the kind of tactical flexibility the system is designed to model. During the activation phase, the sequence of steps is always the same. You go from the order step. Well, first you would identify which formations are activated, of course, as you see there under A. Then you have the order step where you assign and carry out brigade or division orders. Fire combat step where you will resolve your fire combat. Movement, obviously you conduct your movement there. And then assault combat, you engage in close combat. And then, of course, there is the rally step at the end where you attempt to recover units that have been shaken or broken. And you can see in assault, you have additional steps. We'll talk about that when we get to assault combat. Now let's talk about fire combat. And what you see here are just the ranges, just a quick visual. We're going to go through this in a relatively decent amount of detail. So this is obviously when you are firing at range against the enemy. So speaking of range, the first thing you're going to do is measure the distance to the target in hexes. You compare it to the type of unit and the weapon firing. Which you can see here. It's exactly what we're looking at. You've got different types of weapons, including artillery, of course, and then what it can fire. Its range for effect and long range, or effective, I should say, and long range. Okay, then you will have to determine line of sight. The firing unit must be able to see the target. Line of sight is traced down the firing hex to the target hex. Terrain like woods or hills can obscure or block line of sight. There are three key modifiers if the line of sight is obscured. You're going to have intervening woods or thick woods, units at the same or higher elevation, and friendly units that are directly in the line of fire. If line of sight's blocked, the shot cannot be made. If it's obscured, you apply a column shift to the results or to the die roll. Then you have your strength points, and your strength points are the various rows here on the CRT, as you can see. So units will need at least one strength point to fire. The CRT column that is used is based on the total strength points. If multiple units fire on the same target, you combine their strength points. The highest possible starting column is the 10 plus, unless modified by event cards like Casey's Tactics. Now let's talk about column shifts. Column shifts are applied for things like range, terrain, repeating rifles, and unit condition. For example, Union brigades with Spencer repeating rifles may fire twice in a single activation, making them particularly dangerous. Fire combat resolution involves rolling three dice. Black and white dice will give you a 2-digit number from 11 to 66, and you read the black first and the white second. Then the third die, the red die, you save for later. The black and white number is cross-referenced with the final CRT column. The result entry is the type of cohesion test target unit must take. Here you see the fire combat cohesion test table, and the defender will make the cohesion test for each unit in the hex, and your results include shaken, which means unit will lose strength point and morale. Skedaddle means the unit, as you might guess, is going to retreat. Depleted means we're going to flip that unit to its battle-worn side. And broken, the unit is removed to the broken box. Each column reflects not only casualties, but the growing disorder of Civil War combat. On page 17 of the rulebook, we get a fire combat example. And you can see the graphic here. So in this example, the Confederate player activates Buckner's Corps and rolls a result allowing divisional artillery to fire. He chooses Bragg's artillery. And you can see you've got the Confederate units here. So the Confederates fire with 5 strength points at the dismounted Union cavalry in the woods. Dice are rolled. The black die is a 6. The white is a 3, giving a result of 63. You cross-reference that on the CRT. this requires a routine cohesion test. The Union player rolls a red 4 and a white 6 against a CR of 4, failing the test. The CR, of course, is the cohesion rating. The Union unit becomes shaken and must skedaddle 1 hex away with no morale. Oh, with its morale reduced. Sorry about that. Single exchange shows how quickly a brigade can unravel under concentrated artillery fire. So now that wraps up our look at fire combat. And now we're going to move on to movement and talk about how infantry, cavalry, and artillery maneuver across the map and the restrictions of the Chickamauga terrain. Movement in the Rock of Chickamauga is straightforward but highly dependent on terrain and orders. Each infantry or cavalry unit has a number of movement points based on the order it received when activated. If you have an attack order, you get 5 movement points as an infantry unit, or 8 if you're mounted cavalry. Defend orders get the minimum move only, which is 2 hexes on a road or lane, or 1 hex otherwise. Your maneuver order gives you 8 points if you're infantry, or 12 if you're mounted cavalry. And artillery always has 8 movement points. Now let's talk about terrain costs. Here's our terrain effects chart. So you have, the fact is terrain, and as it does in most war games, has a strong effect on movement. Clear hexes have a movement point cost of 1. Excuse me. Thick woods are 3 movement points, and most units must stop upon entry, unless on a road. Full woods cost 2 movement points and had the same stop restriction. Swamp is 4 movement points, and units must stop. Ditch is 2 movement points. Crossing upslope is +1 or +2, depending on steepness. Ford hexes cost 2 movement points, and bridges have no additional cost. Units may never cross Chickamauga Creek except at designated fords or bridges. Now, there are some special rules here. You can see at the very bottom you have major road, lane, etc. And then if you come over to the notes section, you see a note about strength points. This is stacking rules based on that. And you can see if you have more than 10 strength points on any 1 unit counter, or any 1 unit counter, then unit must use movement point cost of other terrain in the hex. And march order allows half movement points, but no engagement. That is, of course, for the major road. The one above without that restriction or mention of the half movement point. It's not a restriction, actually. It's a benefit. But that is, of course, the lane. And you can see the difference here on the what they look like on the map, with the lane being a thin line and the major road being the thick line. Then you see ford and bridge and the Chickamauga Creek, hilltops, steep slopes, slope hicks. So again, the difference in the slope, the steepness, will increase the movement point cost, as I mentioned, and you can see the other terrain types here as well. Now we're going to talk about engagement and defensive fire. When a unit moves adjacent to an enemy, it becomes engaged. Engagement is critical. It ties units together, and the moving unit may trigger defensive fire. The defender may fire immediately as the enemy closes in, often pinning or disrupting the attacker before they can strike. For example, a Union unit advancing into hex 3818 becomes engaged with 2 rebel brigades. Both Confederates fired defensively. So you can see what we're talking about here. Then we have the unit that moves in, which allows these 2 to fire defensively. One causes no effect, but the other forces the Union to retreat, and so the advance stalls before contact is made. Now we'll talk about reinforcement and cavalry movement. So units that arrive as reinforcements enter at a designated map edge using terrain costs as normal, but cavalry units in this respect are special. Mounted cavalry moves faster but cannot fire. Dismounted cavalry act like infantry but have unique withdrawal options in assault combat. Both mounted and dismounted cavalry are always considered battle-worn. Now we're going to get into some combat here, starting with assault combat, or I should say we're going to do assault combat since we've already talked about fire combat. And assault combat represents the bayonet charges in close quarters fighting. It is the most decisive and dangerous action in the game. Only units under an attack order may initiate an assault. Event cards can also grant opportunities to assault. The first step is the attack declaration, and you see that right there. Attack declaration is where the attacking player selects an assaulting hex and declares which adjacent defending hex will be attacked. All units in the assaulting hex attack together. Other adjacent units may contribute as attack support, adding their strength points to the odds. Let's talk about some of the restrictions. A unit can only assault one hex at a time. Dismounted cavalry will attack with a penalty. Artillery can never be used in assault combat. And units in skirmish order contribute only half of their strength points when defending. Now let's briefly go over how assault combat resolution is done. You add up your strength points of the assaulting hex. You compare it to the strength points of the defending hex, and you apply column shifts for odds, cohesion differences, terrain, flanking, or envelopments. Both sides then roll dice simultaneously, cross-referencing results on the assault combat matrix. Before we get into the results, though, I wanted to show you the combat shifts for assault combat. So you have shift effects that will shift the column left, which will generally favor the defender. And then you have column shifts to the right, which will benefit the attacker. Right, and then on the matrix, which is right next to it on the player aid card, zoom out a little bit so you can get a good look at this. This is the assault combat results matrix. And as you can see, you have your results for the attacker at the top, across the top, and the defender across the bottom. And you cross-reference, and here are the combat results codes. So speaking of results, okay, so you have A with the attacker being affected. D would mean the defender is affected, and you can see D's in here and A's in here. Then you have your crush that I just mentioned, which is basically destroying the unit and remove it and put it in the crushed box. And then you have close fight. Both sides are thrown into chaotic melee, potentially leading to further tests. As with fire combat, units may become shaken, depleted, or battle-worn, or broken, depending on cohesion test results. And I forgot to mention this during fire combat, but a unit that has already been flipped, if it receives another result of that type, it would actually be removed. A few other things to mention with assault while we're talking about it is you have attack support, where friendly units adjacent to the battle may add their strength points to the odds, representing pressure on the defender. Then you have withdrawal before combat, which I did not mention, but that allows cavalry or horse artillery to attempt to retreat instead of standing in place, though penalties will apply. Union advance fire tactics. Certain Union brigades, such as Harkers, may fire first, then assault, a deadly combination. Close fights, if both sides roll into a prolonged melee, additional dice are rolled until the fight is resolved. And then attacker breakthrough. If the defending hex is cleared, assaulting units may immediately move in and sometimes launch another assault against adjacent defenders. Now, as has been the case before and is the case frequently here in the rule book, we do have an example of assault combat that we can take a quick look at. So in this example, the Union launches an assault with Gross's brigade, 9 strength points strong, against the Confederate line on the ridge. Odds and terrain shifts will put this attack on the 10+ column. Both sides roll. The Union result is a routine cohesion test, which the rebels fail, becoming shaken and forced back. The Confederate roll is less punishing, inflicting only a skedaddle on one Union regiment. The Union moves in and establishes a foothold on the ridge, then has the option to attempt an attacker breakthrough into the next rebel-held hex. And that closes out our look at assault combat. And Before that, we did look at movement. Together, these rules show how maneuver, defensive fire, and close combat intertwine to simulate the brutal ebb and flow of Civil War battles. Now we're going to move on and take a look at rallying. The rally phase lets you bring units back into fighting shape. Pretty bog standard war game stuff there, right? How you recover your units when they get shaken or disrupted. So shaken units may attempt to remove their shaken marker, but only if they did not move or fire this turn. Eligible infantry and artillery not adjacent to the enemy may rally. Broken infantry units may try to return from the broken box by rolling against their battle-worn cohesion rating. A successful roll flips them back, often still shaken. A failed roll means they stay broken. Artillery, cavalry, and completely crushed units can never rally from the broken box. Hasty works and log works. We move on to entrenchments here. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Actually, before we do that, let's go and look at the end phase real quick, because the end phase is L and entrenchments are M. I got myself a little bit out of order there. So the end phase is pretty straightforward. It's the last phase of the turn. And if you have held event cards, if either player is holding one or more, marked hold, they can be played here. And then you do a victory check. If it's the last turn of the scenario, players will count up their victory points to determine the winner. If not, the game advances to the next turn. As I said, pretty straightforward. Then we have entrenchments, which consist of hasty works and log works. And with hasty works, units can build hasty works if in or adjacent to woods and not adjacent to the enemy. These add a +1 to cohesion for all friendly units in the hex. And then at night, players may construct log works, which add a +2 cohesion rating and improve defenses even more. These entrenchment rules encourage players to dig in and hold ground, especially as night approaches. And speaking of night, let's talk about overnight game turns. The Battle of Chickamauga did cover multiple days, so there is an overnight period. And so dusk is at 8 p.m. and reduces line of sight to 1 hex. Fire combat is still allowed, but is limited. Evening and deep night allow units to move, build entrenchments, or go into bivouac to rest. Units in bivouac may rally, revive, and muster. Rally removes shaken markers. Muster lets a battle-worn unit flip back to fresh. And revive lets infantry in the crushed box attempt to return to play, though with reduced cohesion. Dawn at 6 a.m. removes all bivouac markers and resets units for a new day, though with a penalty to cohesion. Now let's talk about skirmish order, which is O here in the rulebook. Some units may start in skirmish order, representing light troops harassing the enemy, skirmishers, right? They cause a column shift penalty when targeted by fire. They may issue harassing defensive fire, then withdraw up to 2 hexes without counting as a skedaddle. They cannot initiate assaults, but can defend once their marker is removed. Skirmish order is situational, but can be very effective for slowing down the enemy's advance. Now let's go to victory determination, which is alongside this very nice illustration of cavalry from both sides in full charge mode, sabers extended. So talking about victory determination, at the end of the scenario, victory is determined by victory points. These come from holding victory point hexes, such as key crossroads and or bridges. Casualties inflicted upon the enemy, with points awarded for brigades, divisions, or artillery, eliminated depending on the side. Division collapse, where a division that loses most of its units grant a large victory point award to the opponent, for example. Each Confederate player earns 1 victory point per Union infantry unit in the broken box at game's end. The Union earns 2 victory points for each Confederate infantry unit and up to 10 victory points for destroying a Confederate division. This cumulative system rewards aggressive play, but reckless attempts can backfire badly. So that is the end of this video. I do thank you for watching. Now, we've walked through the components, the sequence of play, activations, combat, movement, and everything in between. By now, you should have a hopefully fairly solid grasp of the rules. I would, again, highly recommend reading the rules. There are a lot of things I glossed over. I tried to hit all the high points, but there is a lot of nuance in some of the sections that I really did not delve into too deeply for time purposes. Okay, and as with all war games, the real magic happens in play, seeing how the cards come out, how the cohesion tests ripple through your brigades, and how the fog and friction of war can upend the best laid plans. That's where the Rock of Chickamauga really shines. If you've enjoyed the series, be sure to check out my other deep dives here on Hexed Encountered, including the recent Barbarossa Army Group Center, and some other monster and mid-weight war games that I've covered recently. And if you want to help support the channel, you can like, subscribe, and share these videos, or join and become a member in either the Tier 1, which is called the Hexed level, also nicknamed the CRT Club, and the Tier 2, the Countered level, which is also known as the Order of Battle Elite. And you can do that over on YouTube memberships, which is the join button right below this video. And you'll get some extra content. You'll get access to the Discord server for my channel, as well as getting some early access to videos. And so if you want to do any of those things, that would be fantastic and greatly appreciated. But most importantly, get out there, push those counters around, and see if you can change the outcome of Chickamauga yourself. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep rolling high and staying hexed and countered.